All right, as promised last night, let's jump into a little bit of a deeper dive into the first episode of The Bachelorette. Now, here's here's my take on it, and I kind of said this in last night's little clip. This season's gonna suck, right? I feel bad for Jen. I mean, I think Jen would be a good Bachelorette if the pool of gentlemen that they brought onto the show were actually gentlemen or guys, not little boys that are out here trying to get attention with some incredibly cheesy pickup lines and entrances and that whole nine yards. And I get that that's part of the show, but I truly feel that at this point in the show that it's kind of lost that whole feel that this is genuine, right? That this is genuine and that they're actually trying to find love for the Bachelorette. And part of the reason I say that is we've gotten to the point with the Bachelorette where it must not be as popular as The Bachelor, because The Bachelor, I feel like, they're 30 plus women, 32, 35, whatever it is. And for this Bachelorette, for Jen, she's given a whole 25 guys. And if you look at the guys that are on this show, again, I don't want to be, they don't, there's a handful that feel like they have something to offer, and there's a bunch that just feel like they're there to fill slots. It's like watching a company that has 200% turnover rate just put people with pulses in positions. That's kind of how it felt with these guys on the show. There's just some guys that have some pulses and they threw them out there. They gave them very little screen time. We had no backstory on them. The one guy that did chop the top of the champagne bottle off at the end of the show when he was standing up there for the rose ceremony. I actually looked at my wife and I was like, I have no idea who that is. I forgot that that was his only clip, right? But these are individuals that they just literally put on the show knowing that they're not going to go anywhere, and they cut them off on the first day. It's kind of a waste of a first episode. The other part about this with this episode is, we're jumping right into week 2 traveling to Australia. So they are literally burning through this season as fast as they possibly can for some unknown reason. Either one, they realized when they were going through the editing process that there's just not enough to edit into a lengthy season. There's not enough to edit it into quality viewing, right? There's something going on in the background that production kind of went, you know what, let's make some decisions here and just kind of push through and see what happens. Now, here's something that I find kind of uncanny and a little bit shocking, I guess. And it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me, that ABC is going to do what they need to do to stay away from controversy. Actually, something that was left out of this episode. And we're going to credit Reality Steve for actually sharing this information. I'm not going to introduce Reality Steve. Everybody at this point knows who Reality Steve is. Reality Steve is the GOAT of spoilers for Bachelor Nation, be it Bachelor, Bachelorette, Golden Bachelor, Bachelor in Paradise. Reality Steve has the answers. He already has who's out there who's probably going to win, right? Right? He already knows who's going to win. But anyhow, during this episode, they did a truth or dare segment where they had a giant die, and each of them went through and they had to roll the die and they had to do a truth or a dare. Now, the first dare, shamefully, was streak through the mansion. And you can't tell me this wasn't set up. Obviously somebody knew or wrote all of these truths or dares on these pieces of papers, and they knew what it was going to generate, okay? They knew that these were going to come up. So there was no shocker to what was being flipped over. It's an awareness piece. So the first dare is streak through. So the first gentleman strips down, to his boxers at first, and he has like a lion or something like that on it. You can't tell me production didn't know it because he had an instant one-liner. He knew what he was going to say. It was a very rehearsed line. It was a rehearsed line to the point that as soon as he stripped down and he had those boxers, that line came out, and he thought that it was going to make him famous. Right? That's just how it is. It's a shame. That's what the show's turned into. It's a stepping board for people trying to get famous on social media or whatever, without having to put a ton of the work in like a bunch of us have to do, unfortunately. But anyhow, that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is during this Truth or Dare episode, Devin, if you look at the list there, Devin, our 28-year-old freight company owner, he's an owner of a freight company, rolled the die, and his question was, can you name a conspiracy theory? And straight off the cuff, apparently, Devin said, I believe 911 was an inside job. I believe 9/11 was an inside job. I believe the Twin Towers was an inside job. right? That is what Devin said. It was removed from the show, apparently, because production, the writers, anybody that owns ABC was like, oh my God, we can't be associated with this because apparently Devin goes pretty deep in the season and it's going to get him some hate if we air that. Well, hey, lo and behold, it's out there at this point, right? It's out there. Reality Steve has shared it. Everybody knows that Devin feels this is a conspiracy theory. But here's the thing. First and foremost, there are a lot of people in this country that feel that it is a conspiracy theory, right? There's a lot of people out there that feel it was an inside job. So why shy away from airing it if that's what this individual's true beliefs are? Two, we step back to the last point that I had, that somebody on the production team, the writing team, somewhere down the line, they put those cards out there. They knew the questions that were on those cards, and they knew that question was going to come up at some point. Did they not think that the conspiracy theory that was going to be shared wasn't going to be, some kind of gray area threshold, oh no, this isn't a good topic situation? Or did they think it was going to be a crazy conspiracy theory that isn't a conspiracy theory because they feel that these, guys aren't intelligent enough to know what a conspiracy theory is? However the writing team or production team thought about it, they didn't think good enough, obviously, because Devin's answer created a lot of backlash in the background of the production team that they had to cut it out of the episode. So, anybody that wants to understand or have any comments or concerns, that's Devin that said that it was cut out of the show. So, who do you have a controversy with? Do you have a controversy with Devin for having that opinion, or do you have a controversy with ABC for cutting it out of the episode, feeling that it just wouldn't make good TV? Anyhow, moving on. Mention it again, Jenn should have rolled the dice. She should have been part of the process. It's a shame that she wasn't. We needed to see her part of this process. Everyone to believe that she is buying into all of this. Now, time out. I'm going to take a quick step back and have another conversation about something that Jenn said about this season after it was filmed, right? Now, here's one of the concerns that I have. Jenn has already come out and said it is a shame, it's discouraging that they didn't cast more Asian American men on her season, right? I'm sure somewhere down the line there were questions that came up like, what's your ideal man? What are you looking for? Which she actually shared that at the beginning of the episode, and it was super shallow, funny, friendly, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's nothing below the surface level that she was looking for in a guy, apparently. So if that's what she gave the producers and, the cast people as what she's looking for in a guy, that's pretty generic. I mean, there's just a lot of guys out there. All these guys on the show, even though that I don't feel like they're the best individuals for the show, hey, they check those boxes. Friendly, outgoing, they have a pulse. It doesn't sound like she gave them a lot of information. But anyhow, Jenn has already came out and basically thrown some shade at ABC and Bachelor Nation and Bachelorette for not providing more Asian American men on the show. My stop here is if that is what Jenn was looking for in a relationship, if that's what Jenn was looking for in a relationship, is this the right avenue that Jenn should have taken? Again, we think Jenn was like the third or fourth or fifth option to be the Bachelorette. But if that is, with that comment, if that is the approach that Jenn was taking, that she's upset there was not more Asian American men for her to choose from, then did she follow the process to get into it? Should she have been part of this process? And what is her true agenda in being here? Because celebrate it, she is the first Asian American Bachelorette. That's fantastic. She seems like a great individual. That is fantastic. But what is her agenda? Is her agenda to find love or to promote Asian American men being on the show? Maybe they didn't want to be part of the show. Maybe they have their own agendas and this isn't the route they want to take. Did you think about that, Jenn? That's just throwing it out there. Maybe this isn't, where their personality wants to lead them. They obviously didn't sign up. They obviously didn't go through the process. So there's a reason that Asian American men aren't on the show. They didn't want to go through the process for one reason or another, whatever that be, right? So that's just kind of how I look at that side of it. So the episode itself, looking at the episode itself, and I kind of talked about this last night. We're just briefly going to go through this. It was just, to me, incredibly generic. A 2-hour episode that probably could have been an hour long. It was just so poorly scripted, from the rental car that is shown in the one guy's introduction, to the rental car that the other guy pulled up in front of the mansion in, which isn't the Bachelor mansion, supposedly, that he drove all the way from New York. Again, we mentioned it last night. If that's your car and you put that kind of money and love into a car that looks that nice, and some random guy that you just met walks out of the house with your keys and throws you out of your own car, your ass is not walking away from the car. I don't care who you are. You're not going to be like, oh yeah, hop into my expensive car, give the keys to somebody, rev it up out in front of the mansion. I trust you. You're not going to. I mean, I own, I don't own the best car in the world, and I'm not going to let some random person take my keys and just sit inside of it. It's just common sense, right? It's just common sense. It's not part of the process. It's scripted, right? A lot of the other entrances were just, to me, less than stellar. I mean, they were subpar. And we've all watched many seasons of The Bachelor and Bachelorette, and we've seen some classic, really good entrances from both the ladies and the guys coming into the shows. And honestly, in last night's episode, there's not many that I'm like, oh, that was a really good entrance. There really is not that many that I'm like, that was. I think the most unique entrance to me was the guy that walked up with the balloons. Who was that? The guy with the balloon. I think that was Hakeem. I could be wrong. I might be wrong on who that was with the balloons. But I actually liked the balloon idea. He had a pretty cool pickup line. It was cheesy as hell, but it made sense. It fit in. Obviously, he got to take the balloons off, which is actually abnormal if you've ever watched the other seasons. Generally, what you show up in is what you have to wear for the remainder of the evening. He got to take his balloons off because they're probably just a nuisance at that point, right? Probably just a nuisance at that point. But anyhow, across the spectrum, the entrances were lackluster at best. I think there were 3 or 4 that were trying to play on Jenn's, shot o'clock thing from the last finale. Really, like, if that's where your mindset is and that's what you think that Jenn, who's now the Bachelorette, the first Asian American Bachelorette, if you feel that that is like her mentality and that's where you're going, I just don't see it. But hey, I'm probably wrong, because she gave Sam M her first impression rose, and Sam M was the first one to get out of the car and do the shot o'clock thing. What is going on with the show? Like, where's it going? Where's it going? He's a contractor. Sam M is a contractor, right? From South Carolina. In the little one-on-one, I don't know if she wasn't listening and thought that he said cowboy, because she's like, oh, it's going to be awesome to meet a cowboy. He's from South Carolina and he's a contractor. And nowhere during his spiel did he mention anything about being a cowboy. But in her mind, she's created him that he's a cowboy. So apparently Sam M's a cowboy. Now, my wife instantly called him the villain. Anything that she's read has basically said that he's a douchebag, that he's a villain. We're not going to touch too much on his personal life. We know that he was previously married or engaged, one of the two, could be engaged. But he was previously connected farther than just dating, and they broke up because apparently she cheated on him. I am going to be interested. I am going to be incredibly interested to read or hear or see anything that comes out in the future from her side or her point of view as to, what happened. And then maybe we can read between the lines and find that truth and see what's there. But Sam M, the cowboy, definitely not a cowboy, contractor, got the first rose. Maybe he should go on Farmer Wants a Wife. Because Farmer Wants a Wife does a show, and they put farmers on her that aren't technically farmers. This last season they had 4 farmers, and 1 was actually a farmer. The other 3 just kind of had some property and whatnot. But that's neither here nor there, and that's a different reality show. Anyhow, at the end of the episode, after we, really just drug our tails through the entire night, and again, it's psychological. It's a psychological effect. It's a psychological study, really, that this show, and ABC and Bachelor and Bachelor Nation does, because they start filming late at night. They film all the way through the night, and they do the rose ceremony in the morning when the sun comes up. And if you've never realized that, pay attention next time and see that the filming occurs overnight. So these people are just beat. They're mentally tired. You can see the yawns and in her face. They are detached, right? Which is probably why Jenn went in for that long long. I mean, they just kept showing it, didn't it? That long kiss at the end. They just wouldn't let it go. But she was probably delirious at that point. He was probably delirious. However much alcohol they had, I know they limited them to like 2, but I'm sure they sneaked that shit in there. But she was probably delirious. He was delirious. The longest kiss that I've ever seen on any of the Bachelor shows. But anyhow, by the time the rose ceremony rolls around, all of these guys and ladies and probably the cast that's filming all this, they're just delusional at this point because they've had sleep deprivation. They've had nothing to eat because if you never noticed, nobody eats on Bachelor or Bachelorette. It doesn't exist. They put food out there. You look at it and go, oh, it looks pretty good. But they never take a bite of it. Last year in Joey's season, we got to see him eat some Kentucky Fried Chicken for a celebration. But it's just one of the things that doesn't happen. But it's part of the psychological test that they do, the psychological study that they do to see how much they can break these people. Watch throughout the season. Jen is a small lady, but watch and see how much weight she loses through the season just from the stress and the anxiety of the psychological process. Same thing with the guys. Watch what it does to them. You'll see where the most mundane thing will just break them. It'll break them down to tears. It'll break them down to being like, oh my God, life's coming to an end, right? Because that's part of the psychological process that they put them through in this, which is why, in my opinion, at the end of this, when they get healthy and they get back to life and they have daily routines again, the vast majority of these relationships don't last because they don't know anything about each other. They have no idea. They know nothing about each other. They've learned about each other through sleep deprivation, food deprivation, lack of interaction on any form outside of themselves. I mean, they're basically locked in their rooms whenever they do all this traveling. And then by the time they get back to the real world, and they rejoin the real world, they don't have a ton in common and they generally break up. What's the success rate? I know it's super low. If somebody knows it, put it in the comments. I'm sure I could search it, but I'm not too sure off the top of my head right now. But I know the success rate for any of these shows in the Bachelor Nation is low. It's super low. Hey, Golden Bachelor, 0% success rate. And my success rate, it's not what happens at the end of the show. It's where they're at a year or 2 years later. Like, are they still together? Because, again, that is when you rejoin society out of this psychological process and see what kind of relationship you truly have. And they don't last very long. And that is my very circumspect roundabout. Let's talk about some crazy topics. Episode 1 recap for Jen Meets the Guys on The Bachelorette. We'll see you next week. We'll see where this goes. We're already down to, 18 guys? We got rid of 7 in the first episode. Again, 25 guys, to me, that seems super low compared to what we've seen in previous seasons where we've seen up to 32, this and that. We know some random guy by the scenes at the end gets dropped into the middle and is like, oh, I'm from Jen's past, and I just happened to fly here to be on the show. And they make it out like he just, there he is. He just made this decision to show up. Obviously, that's production and writing. You can't tell me they didn't know the dude was showing. He basically flew there. They had a camera follow him in, and yeah. But that's what the show's become. Written, scripted, fake, children trying to get famous, social media, and unfortunately, sometimes, and I think Jen will be part of this process, sometimes the Bachelor or Bachelorette actually gets hurt because they are truly looking for love, and they're given a bucket full of crap to choose from. It's going to be a good season. It's going to be a good season, right? I don't know. See you next week.